Okay. Okay, welcome to Internship Showcase for those who have just joined us. We are starting in with the Engineering, Architecture, and Science panel. The purpose of the Internship Showcase is twofold: to explore various job functions, industries, and career opportunities, to learn how to get an internship in your area of interest, from submitting your application to actually getting the offer. The panelists with us today were selected and invited by us, the career consultants, to share their internship experiences, as well as their efforts and strategies for obtaining them.
Great. Thanks, Ray. Hi, all. I'm Rachel Rosenfeld, one of the career consultants. I'm going to briefly introduce the panelists. So we have Vanshika Gandotra, who was an intern at Stantec Architecture, Dylan Liu, who was an intern at Ecotone Renewables, Ali Hoffman, who was an electrical engineering hardware intern at Northrop Grumman, Sharfin Islam, who was an intern at hardware intern at Exxon Tech, Alyssa Brown, an intern at Medtronic, and Frankie Moore, a junior fellow at the Library of Congress. So each of the panelists is going to present for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then after we'll have a Q&A. If you have questions, we do ask that you put them in the chat, and we're going to address those after the presentations. And lastly, before we jump in with our panelists, please make sure your video is off, except of course for the panelists, and that your mics are muted. Okay, so with that, we can get started with our panelists.
Hi everyone, I'm Vanshika Gandotra. I was an architecture intern at Stantec in the summer of 2020. I'm currently a 5th year pursuing a Bachelor of Architecture, and I'm going to graduate in May this year. So this summer I worked at Stantec Architecture, which is a design consulting, which is a firm in the design consulting industry. It covers a large variety of construction functions, so architecture, structural engineering, mechanical engineering, and they also have a very active marketing and HR department. The firm's goal is to design with the community in mind. It's a very large firm. It has 22,000 employees in 350 locations across 6 continents. My role there was as an architecture intern. I worked there full time, and it was a remote internship. I met them at the Creative Arts and Opportunities Conference. They had a table there, so I went up to them. I spoke to them about my work. I introduced them to a few of my projects, and we had a conversation about the kind of work they do. And about a week later, I received an email from them asking to meet for an interview. At the interview, we talked about my portfolio in more depth, and we had a conversation about my work ethic and my work style. They gave me a tour of the office. They told me about their office's culture, and that was the internship. And then I was offered a position there for the summer. My work at Stantec was primarily on the Intern project, which was the Artist Boat Environmental Education Center in Galveston, Texas. Artist Boat is a nonprofit marine conservation organization. So the way Stantec made the best out of the remote internship was by putting us in an internship program where we collaborated with all of the interns across all of North America. That gave us a very unique opportunity to collaborate across the different offices and disciplines. So my team was made of a structural engineering intern, a mechanical engineering intern, and 3 architecture interns. And I got to work with people from the Cleveland office as well as other offices, and we had mentors all across. Another project that I worked on while I was at Stantec was the AIA Design Award submissions. That gave me an opportunity to meet with or to interact with seniors at the firm, which was something that I wasn't getting as much with everything being remote, and get to know projects that Stantec has done that they're really proud of and they want to submit for awards. So I worked on the Bucknell University Academic Press building, which was a LEED Gold building, and I got to learn about large-scale applications of really cool passive design and really cool environmentally intelligent design. And another building that we submitted the design award submission for was Allegheny Health Network's Jefferson and Emergency Department. So my advice that I have to you for your application as well as for your internship is to be proactive and to apply early. The reason I was able to secure an internship at a time where the construction industry was taking a massive hit in the pandemic is because I did things as early as I possibly could. And that's what helped me secure that position. Another piece of advice that I have is to be proactive and eager to learn. People at a firm like Stantec and other firms, which are very large, are very, very eager to teach, but unfortunately, they've got overlapping meetings through the day, so they might not be able to reach out to you as much. But if you reach out to them and ask them questions, they are going to be very, very happy to teach you. And it's more important now than ever that you're not in the office. These are things that they notice. Make use of the resources that are available to you at the CPDC. I have interacted a lot with Kaden Bush, who is the coordinator for the Department of Architecture, helped me with my interviewing, my resume, my portfolio, my website, and even with deciding, which job offer to respond to. So I would say definitely make use of the CPDC as much as you can. Be very involved within the community of architecture organizations. So attend as many AIAS and NOMAS events as you can and show active engagement in the community, because it gives you the opportunity to have conversations about things that professionals care about and that you should know about if you're going to interviews. And then finally, I would say don't be too rigid about your chosen trajectory within the field. So I know that a lot of people say that they only want to work in healthcare, or that they only want to work in the education sector, or they only want to work in residential. But I think in the beginning, really open yourself up to work on different kinds of projects. And I think that you will find your expectations challenged, and I think you'll find yourself positively surprised. So that's what I have for you today. Thank you, everyone. I hope I was helpful.
Hey everyone, my name is Dylan and I'm a senior in the Material Science and Engineering department here at CMU. And this past summer, I worked as a sustainable engineering intern for Ecotone Renewables, which is a local student-led startup company, which I now actually run as the CEO. To tell you a little bit of how I got involved in this startup, so I actually joined the team during the fall of 2017 through a mutual friend, and our most recent CEO stepped away from the team last month, so I've just recently taken on this new leadership position. And to tell you a little bit more about what we do, so the mission at Ecotone Renewables is to close the food loop, which I'm definitely personally passionate about due to my longtime love of food, cooking, sustainability, and gardening and horticulture. And so this past year, we actually constructed and tested a portable anaerobic digestion system, which sustainably processes up to 10 tons a year of food waste. And we just recently moved our system from East Liberty, which was right down the street from Noodlehead. I feel like that's the location we all know. And we're now actually located in Swissvale. And moving on to the next slide. So while interning for Ecotone this past summer, I specifically developed a CAD model for our digester system, and I also redesigned our food waste grinding station, which I'm now actually constructing. And then we also needed to prepare for our move to Swissvale, so we had to kind of drain the system for that. And then I also grew and harvested fresh produce. And my advice for anyone that's looking to get involved in the Pittsburgh startup scene or any other sort of local businesses is to definitely talk to your professors first. Many of them have some pretty awesome industry connections that they can kind of introduce you to. And I also definitely recommend attending as many networking events as you feel comfortable attending. And I know even the virtual ones, they might seem like they're not really that helpful, but I've actually met a ton of pretty amazing and inspiring entrepreneurs through these virtual networking events. So I definitely do recommend going to those, putting yourself out there. And there are a ton of resources here at CMU too. So The Schwartz Center at CMU has a ton of startups that you can either start getting involved in, or if you want to explore making your own startup company, they're also a really good kind of infrastructure to build on. And overall, I think I would just say, follow your passions through your career and your work. This is something that you're kind of going to be doing for the most part of each day, every week. So it's definitely something you want to be passionate about and that you enjoy. And definitely don't be stressed out if you're doing an internship that's not exactly what you want to do, because even learning what you don't want to do as the career is just as helpful. So definitely take some time to make some mistakes, choose some different types of opportunities, and just kind of explore on your own, I would say.
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm a junior studying ECE, so I'm graduating in 2022. This summer, I was an electrical hardware engineering intern at Northrop Grumman. Sounds like a very complicated title, but it's not. So Northrop Grumman, as some of you might know, so I worked in their mission systems sector, which is related to radar and stuff along those lines. Because I worked for a government contractor, I am limited in what exactly I can say and what exactly I can show, but I'm happy to answer as many of your questions as I can. So I specifically was a hardware engineering intern. I worked with RFIC chips. So I learned a little bit about like the basics of how do radio frequency integrated circuits work. And so I was recruited a bit differently. I have my dad's cousin works for the company, and I think it was around Thanksgiving, and I was like, I don't know where I'm working this summer and I don't know what to do. And I talked to my dad's cousin and I was like, hey, you work for Northrop Grumman and they do stuff sort of similar to what I think I might want to do. Do you want to like maybe like put in a referral? So he put in a referral, and they originally, I thought I wasn't going to get an interview actually because I didn't have enough experience. And then a team reached out to me. I had an interview, and then later that day I was called and told they wanted to offer me a position. Next slide, please. So I was a bit different because I worked on several projects throughout the summer. So my first project was I developed a 6-unit course on behavioral modeling, which is basically a way to try to understand like, how is this chip working? How do we think it's going to work? Will it be able to work how we think it's going to work? So I learned how to develop that using Verilog AMS, which was a language that I had never really heard of before. I had like half heard of it, but I'd never actually used it. And then at the end of the summer, it was really cool because I recorded my presentation, and now my course is published on the learning management system at Northrop Grumman. So although I'm not going back next summer, if I were to go back in the future, I'd be able to look at my work. And then I also built, checked, and simulated a Verilog AMS behavioral model for a chip. So we found out that there was this chip that was causing the engineers in the labs several issues when they were trying to test it. So I developed a model to try to help them debug the chip. And then I modified existing components to reflect current notation standards. Lastly, some of the skills I worked on. So I mentioned that I learned a bit more about how to use Verilog AMS. And I think one of the biggest skills I learned was communication skills. I made these slides at the beginning of the summer that I thought were pretty good. And then I met with a learning engineer, someone who understands how people learn the best. And I learned that my slides were actually terrible, and fixed them and made them a lot better. Next slide, please. So I talked about it. I completed my first project in roughly 2 weeks, which enabled me to work on 4 other projects. And so the main reason why I drove myself to do that was because when I started working, I thought that I was kind of upset that I was going to be making a course throughout the summer. Granted, it was really cool, but I wanted to have more hands-on work. So I kind of motivated myself, and I thought that if I were to finish this faster, then I'd have all of this other time left over, and hopefully I'd get to work on something really cool. And I got to do that. As I said, I can't really share photos, advice. So several pieces of advice. So I don't have this listed, but if you know anyone and you're trying to get a job, reach out to them. If you know, like your parent's friend knows someone, or maybe your professor knows someone, it doesn't hurt to reach out to them. What's the worst that can happen? They say, sorry, I don't know anyone, or they don't respond to your email. You're really not expected to know everything about your job on the first day. You might think, oh, like I should know everything, but you're an intern and you don't work for the company yet. Like you're just starting, so it's totally okay to ask questions. And the best way I found to ask questions was when I was working on a project, I would keep a list next to me of like questions I had. And then at the beginning of the day, or sometimes I'd check in with my mentor, like in the middle of the day or something, and I'd send him basically all of my questions. And I was like, okay, how do I do this, 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 and this? And that made it feel like I wasn't encroaching as much on his time, and I was still able to respect that at the same time. And lastly, take courses that interest you. One of the things I found was that, so like Northrop Grumman has a rotational program for new hires. So what that means is you can spend roughly 3 different rotations trying out different jobs. So maybe for the first year, so these rotations go for roughly a year. You could spend like the first year doing like a position in power electronics, and maybe another year doing something else, and another year doing something else. And then at the end of that, you can decide what you want to do. And I was told by so many full-time engineers that you should take courses that you're interested in, and you don't know everything about your job, even if you went to school for it and you're starting to work for a company full-time. That's the point of this job, is to teach you. But yeah, good luck with your internships and applying. Also apply early, it makes everything a lot easier.
Hi everyone, I'm Sharfin and I was a hardware intern at Exton Technologies last summer. So a little bit about me, I'm a senior Mechie and with a minor in robotics. I'm graduating this spring, and I've done robotics research for like pretty much the last 3 years, but up until that internship, I haven't had a like industry experience. I had a lot of like teaching experience and things like that, but not at like a company. So at Exton, essentially it's a startup that was branched off of a lab at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm from the Philadelphia area, so I actually like knew about this lab for like several years, and I have been like keeping track of this company for a while. So essentially the company is trying to develop like an autonomous drone that can go anywhere. And it's really focused on creating maps for like GPS denied environments. So like one of the biggest applications is sending the drone into like a mine, and then the drone will itself, without any user control, be able to create a detailed map of the mine. So it'll save like a lot of lives, a lot of time, and sort of help get that information for the surveyors. So next slide. Yeah, so as a hardware intern, a startup, one of the biggest difference with like a startup between like a company like Northrop Grumman that has like thousands and thousands of employees is that it's really small, and the projects, like you can know every single project that's going on. The hardware team was probably about like 10 to 12 people, so I knew everyone, I met with everyone every week, and I could like have my hands on a bunch of different projects. So I was able to sort of work on a bunch of different aspects. Most of it had to do with hardware design, CAD, things like that. So my main project was to develop like an active lighting system with a camera mount. So basically just like fit on the camera, and then it will be able to give the surveyors some like camera feedback instead of just the map. So a lot of my work had to do with like heat transfer, things like that. And I also was able to work on a like non-drone, but like sort of mountable system. So I actually designed the entire system to your right, just using like, I don't know, just like things I found off Amazon and McMaster. But pretty much like I was really thrown around a lot between a bunch of different projects. So it was really cool to see like the different work going on. And it was really interesting because I've been doing research for 3 years, and I sort of was interested in the step beyond research when professors take their work into industry and sort of make it more applicable. And that's the work that I was doing. So I got to see that aspect of engineering and sort of engineering research where it actually goes into like real world. So that was really cool. And I definitely recommend sort of looking at beyond just like small companies and looking at startups, because you have a lot bigger community, and it's a lot tighter. So you're able to like meet the people that you're be working with and like your advisors a lot more often. So next slide. Yeah, so there's a lot of advice that's gonna be thrown out today. I honestly think I got this internship because of my experience in robotics, and I also had a really personal connection with this company. I emailed the professor who founded this company, who's now the dean of Penn Engineering, when I was in like 7th grade, and I was like, "Yo, your work is really cool. Can I work with you?" Like, I got an A in Algebra 1, and he didn't respond. So that was my cover letter, and that definitely caught some heads. But in terms of robotics, if you guys are looking for like a robotics internship, robotics is an incredibly diverse field, and no undergraduate experience will give you enough experience to be working as like an engineer in the robotics field. So taking classes that sort of expose you to like different facets of robotics and getting experiences in labs or like classes is really useful, especially if you're looking for a hardware intern position. Usually hardware interns or like hardware engineers at robotics companies need to be well versed in like electromechanics and also mechanical design. So you want to have experience in like circuit design, electrical integration, and also like I said, robotics is so diverse that like you will never know everything you need to know. So your biggest asset is your ability to adapt and learn, and that's something that you want to put like in the front of like your cover letter or whatever. Just like be willing to say like, yeah, I don't know everything I need to know, but I have experiences that have challenged me and will like sort of help me get to where I need to be, so I know what I need to know to accomplish this goal. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So good luck with your internship search, and thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Brown, and I'm excited to share my experience as a summer intern at Medtronic. I am a senior in mechanical and biomedical engineering, specifically on the biomechanics track, and I'm also the president of Society of Women Engineers and vice president of Tau Beta Pi, which is the Engineering Honor Society. So I can definitely talk about how those networks have kind of helped me with my internship journey. Medtronic is one of the largest medical device companies in the world, and it has over 90,000 employees all around the globe. Its biggest sectors are the cardiovascular group and the minimally invasive therapies group. This summer in 2020, I was an intern within the Gynecological Surgical Innovations team, which is a part of the minimally invasive therapies group. And I was on their pre-product development team, which is really early phase design cycle, which was really exciting. And I also interned at Medtronic in the cardiovascular group in 2019. So this summer, I only had a final round interview with the manager in the GYN team. But in 2019, I had an interview at a career fair, at the National SWE Career Fair, and then a final round with the hiring manager that I worked with. Next slide, please. So the GYN Surgical Innovations team is focused on developing non-invasive tools that are used to treat uterine diseases. So that could be anything from just an abnormal tissue growth to uterine cancer. And these operations are performed with a device called a hysteroscope, which is pretty scary looking, but it's not that bad. So you can see those on the right, and most of the tools that the team designs can be inserted through these scopes. So I was working on 2 projects throughout the summer, and like I said, it's very early pipeline, so I can't actually talk about any of the specifics of the disease state or the device, but I can talk about my general process. So for the first project, it was to design a locking mechanism for a novel design for a new device. And so the first step was to format my own project requirements and outline my own design specifications for the locking mechanism. And then I spent the majority of the summer in concept generation. So it was trying to get out of my head, think of all of the possible ways that I could possibly accomplish this task, and then narrow it down little bit by little bit based on the design specifications. I also did a lot of CAD modeling once I had my final design, and eventually submitted an internal invention disclosure so that I would have the IP responsibility of the locking mechanism. And then in tandem, when I was getting so sick of thinking of all these design concepts, I was also working on investigating the merits of a new potential therapy. So first step was to research the disease state and the current therapy options from the Medtronic competitors on the market right now. And then I got to lead voice of customer interviews with 5 OBGYN surgeons. And so these were double-blind conference calls where I just got to ask all kinds of questions about the types of devices they liked and what they really looked for in these treatment options and where we could identify a gap that Medtronic could fill. And then I was tasked with also writing an official summary report for that to explain my findings and talk about potential design specifications if Medtronic were to continue this project. Next slide, please. The skills that were really important that I found throughout this internship were definitely research and literature searches. For biomedical engineering, you have to know so much about the clinical space before you can even begin to think about your engineering problems. You have to learn how to really efficiently catch yourself up, especially when it's a short-term internship. And then also I learned so much about the concept generation process and how to not think about your specifications for a little bit and then figure out how to incorporate them in order to pick your favorite design. And I also did a lot of engineering drawing and modeling, which was super important this summer, specifically with the remote internship, because you have to make it 2D and show somebody virtually rather than just being able to go into a lab and mock something up and bring it to your teammates. So don't underestimate the power of learning how to draw and model on your own. I think some of my biggest accomplishments for the summer were exploring the engineer and clinician interface, which is something that's really, really important for biomedical engineers because you have to understand what the surgeons want and what the patients want. And like I said, submitting the internal invention disclosure and learning how to work with people virtually that you haven't met before, you don't know the team dynamics as well. So that was really important. And then my advice for future interns is to remember your engineering fundamentals. I know that's what everyone says, but in order to work in the design space at all, you have to have some intuition about how different parts are going to interact, how things are going to bend and stress in certain ways. And so building off of that, engineering design classes are extremely helpful, even if your project has absolutely nothing to do with the field that you're interning in. Just working together in a team and building something will always be helpful. And last thing is to use your network. I mentioned at the beginning that I got my first internship at Medtronic by going to the National C Conference. And so any network that you can use through your engineering groups or anything like that is very crucial to finding your internship. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Frankie Moore. I'm actually pursuing a dual degree in chemistry and history as part of the SHS program, which is, I'm the second to last class of that program. I previously worked as an unpaid volunteer / intern with the Library of Congress, which allowed me to understand the hiring process a little bit better for the Junior Fellow program. The program itself can be found online. If you look up Junior Fellow IFP, there will be a list of different projects you can work on, as well as application dates. The applications have already stopped for the summer of 2021, but by the end of next summer, you should be able to apply for this 2022 internship. It's very well paid, and they do virtual experiences, which is great. And that's what I'm going to talk about for this presentation. Can you move to the next slide? Thanks. So the Junior Fellows program is composed of 2 halves with the different responsibilities. So for one half of the program, you are in your host division. So this could be the African American diaspora collection. This could be with the business and science division. For me as a chemist, I worked with the preservation research and testing division. So typically you go through training on the software that you're using, which for me meant WebEx and Cisco. I had to have a virtual Citrix, so I had to have a virtual desktop, which was very annoying to work with, and trying to get up to date with the software that was available for me to use for the projects. I had to do a lot of reading for the project itself. I had daily check-ins with my supervisor, and I had to work towards a final project, which was a final paper around like 20, 30 pages, and I had to give a presentation to the entire division. But I was also being paid by IFP, which is the Internship and Fellowship Division. So I had to go to weekly meetings that they hosted, which included seminars for career training, tours. Part of the cool thing about the Cheer Fellows program is that you get a tour of the Culpeper facility, which I think has like 8 million films, like actual reels of film that you get to walk through, and you get to go through all of the cool things they do for preservation. And you also get a tour of Capitol Hill. You get a tour of the Jefferson, Adams, and Madison building, which is really cool. The Jefferson building is where the primary museum is housed for the public. The Madison building is where I, as a chemist, worked in. And the Adams building is where there are a lot of archives and where other divisions within the library work in. For this project, we had to do a virtual display day, which included an infographic that could not be made using Photoshop. It had to be made using Microsoft Word, which was a bit difficult. We had to make a video talking about our project to the public, which was very difficult, considering that a lot of what I was doing was very technical light data. And we also had to create like a little description of our project to the public, because ultimately the goal of this experience is to make the resources of the library available to the public. So I had to act as if I was presenting this to a high school graduate, and I had to make sure all of my information could be understood by a high school graduate. Next slide, please. Great. The program is an excellent opportunity for multiple types of career enrichment. Specifically, the online experience was great. There were some technical difficulties, but I found that the division was very flexible with their hours. Normally I had to take a 3-hour break in the afternoon because it would get so hot, and they were completely fine with that as long as I worked 40 hours a week. They didn't care, which is really cool. Next thing, please. There were a lot of great technical opportunities. This definitely forms the core of my grad school application because it was such a unique way of serving the public, as in like the American public and in general the world public, as well as learning more about the science that I could do in a different perspective. Typically for chemistry, you either have academia or industry, and this presented a very unique opportunity for me to bridge both. Because it's not just academia, it's also industry as well. The final thing was career seminars. It was nice to brush up on different resume skills and different typical programming, essentially, as an employee. I would say advice for this specific program is to go to the GCC or the CPDC and request a government consultant. The main reason I think I got this job was because I sat down with someone who had worked with the State Department, and we went through the USA Gov website, which can be a bit of a nightmare. Highly recommend applying for this. I'd also highly recommend just randomly Googling like the field you want to work in internship, because that was how I initially got the internship before this. And that was also how I heard about this program. I can't speak highly enough about it, and that's it.
So thank you. And thanks to all of our panelists. While you're all so impressive. Before we get to the Q&A, panelists, if you are open to students emailing you after this with questions, could you just put your email address in the chat now? And this is also a good time for our attendees, if you have a question, to put it in the chat. Great, thank you all so much for doing that. So now we're gonna open it up to our attendees if anyone has a question.
Well, while we wait for questions, I want to throw one of mine in. So, Allie, I know you had mentioned that you couldn't really talk about too much, and I know that that is a part of a typical NDA or non-disclosure agreement. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience with an NDA?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I actually didn't have to sign an NDA because I didn't work on anything that we deemed super secretive because I didn't have a clearance. But for a lot of people, so just because I didn't sign an NDA doesn't mean that I should go out to the world and talk about everything I did over the summer, because I worked on classified stuff and I worked on projects that will help benefit the company. And so mainly the best way I just go around it is I just flat out explain to people that, look, I worked for the nature of the work I did and to the company I worked with. There's all of these like rules and stuff that I can't really talk about just because of what I did. So I can try to answer your questions to the best of my ability, but don't expect me to be able to talk about everything. The other thing that I found really interesting was that within the company, there's also a lot of secrecy, I guess you could say, in the sense that like a lot of the information that's like brought down, like for example, names of projects, everything has different names. So honestly, if you only really know about the projects you're working on, and you'll hear about like some other projects, but you'll never actually know what they really are. And that helps maintain like secrecy, I guess, within the company and like helps prevent major leaks and stuff.
Thank you, Ellie.
Great. We have a question in the chat from Kevin Monahan. Many of the panelists recommend engaging faculty, alumni, et cetera, to network. What did you say when you asked them for a referral? So if any of you can jump in on this.
I actually didn't get a referral from my company, but my professor who I'm doing research with knew I worked at Exton Technologies, and there was a master's student that was interested in the company. So he actually put me in contact with him, and I sent his email to my supervisor, who was the hiring manager at Exton. So like you can just like reach out to a professor if you know that they have some sort of connection to the company, because that master's student knew that my advisor went to Penn, and there was that connection there. So if you just reach out to a professor, professors are usually like really down to help, especially like if they have some sort of connection or personal connection and they know you in their class. You can just reach out to them as an email or something like that, and they'll happily put you in contact.
Thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up with my question. Was any other panelists dealing with an NDA within any of their work?
I was.
Okay.
So this was a little bit frustrating for me actually to not be able to tell people because I was so excited about what I was working on. So I had a lot of conversations with my manager and just about how to excite people about working in a field of gynecology where people are a little bit hesitant to talk about, but it's really, really fascinating. And so basically you just have to find a way to talk about your work in relation to the products that are already on the market, because this team has released already so many projects. You just can't talk about specific diseases that you're working on or what the ultimate goal of your work is. But like I said, I was still able to talk about my whole project process and what I learned from it, rather than, oh, this is the device I was working on to treat this specific disease. And so it was something that I talked a lot with my manager about. How do I talk about this in interviews, or how do I put this on my resume? So if you have questions about how to sort of navigate working with your NDA, definitely just talk with your teammates, talk with your manager. Don't be afraid to ask questions. They know that you don't know how to navigate something like this.
Okay, thanks. How about you, Frankie?
So I technically didn't have to sign an NDA, but I did have to talk to my boss's boss, the chief of the entire division, which is composed. So the way the division works is there's an accountant, there's a bookkeeper, there are around 20 senior scientists, and then there is a chief who is responsible for going to meetings within another cluster of divisions, who ultimately reports to the Librarian of Congress. So I had to talk to my chief about what I could and couldn't say. And eventually, like, I can outline things. I can talk a lot more in grad school interviews, for example, about the work that I did. But to a general audience, I can't really talk a lot about the work that I specifically did, like buffers, solutions, anything like that. I can't talk in broad strokes about the experience, which is why I chose to do that. But definitely, essentially, you can modulate information a little bit, but it's still could be published. It still could be up for a patent. which is important because if this is public work for the American public, if they were able to get a patent, then it would be free to the American public versus done by a private corporation, which is very important. So yeah, I had to ask my boss's boss essentially for permission to even give this talk in the first place. And they were like, yes, you can use this information. Great, thanks. So yeah. I will say this though, it also depends on the sensitivity of your information. So I had people who were working a lot with human experimentation files in the science and business division, and that was a lot more secretive and a lot more kept under lock and key, just because they were reading old files from like the 1940s and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Frankie. So one of the questions that I have is, you all had some great experiences, but leading up to that, roughly how many applications did you put in during your search process?
I can just talk about my experiences with internship hunting. So up until last year, I actually was never offered an internship up until last summer. And I've definitely applied to like close to 100 sophomore, freshman year in total. Junior year, I was actually looking to do more research, but I applied to this company because I saw that they were hiring and I had like a personal history with it. And that was the only application I sent in. And that was the offer I got. So it really depends. I also think like, as I took more classes, I don't think I became like necessarily a better engineer. And I think I honestly would have been able to do this job as a sophomore, but I became more confident in like the way my cover letter was written, the way my resume was shaped. It was really just like minor things, and my communication with professionals changed. And that came from other experiences I had besides internships. So I worked at like summer camps, I did research, so I had to like sort of engage with professionals in different industries and different sort of facets, and that definitely helped me secure an internship later on in my career. So if you don't get an internship in your industry, like freshman or sophomore year, you'll get skills that will sort of aid you in getting it'll like sort of put you on the path to where you want to be overall.
Thanks. Does anybody else want to answer the question about?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
So going into my sophomore year, or like my sophomore year, for last summer, I applied to maybe, I don't know, 25 to 50 companies, I think. But what was interesting was that when I was applying for internships this summer, I applied to maybe 10. And the only ones I really applied for were the people who reached out to me, or if I found them through like a career fair or something. And I found that because I worked at Northrop Grumman as a hardware engineering intern, I found that so many companies were interested in me, whereas like sophomore year, people were like, why do I care about her?
Gotcha.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one? Otherwise, I have a, yeah.
Sorry, I had a similar experience to Ali. So my sophomore year summer, I applied to like, I don't even know, like 50 companies, and I hardly heard back from someone. And then finally I was going to work for one of my professors who was starting the coding firm, and that, fell through for several reasons. But this summer, I only spoke to people who had met with the CAOC and who reached out to me. And before I even got to my applications, I already had a couple of interviews. So my application process was very, very different this summer than some before.
Thank you. We do have another question in the chat. From Jeremiah Cochran. For those who worked in research and development roles, what practical skills do you wish you knew before you started your internship?
Yeah, I can definitely answer this. I think I was definitely pleasantly surprised by how well I felt with some of my engineering work. And I think lab experience I didn't really think would be that applicable, but surprisingly it was. And like I would use very similar equipment in my work or do kind of just like analogous work. So I think getting that kind of hands-on experience in labs, if that's not like a required part of your curriculum, I think maybe taking any sort of electives that can kind of help supply that, I think is definitely helpful.
Thank you. Did anyone else want to answer that question?
Yeah. So the way that my company was sort of divided was there was a hardware team and there was a research and development team. And the research and development team, usually in like robotics companies, is made up of mostly like PhD students with extensive experiences in robotics research and development. There were some undergraduate interns in that team, and they really looked for sort of like a self-starter culture and mentality in the individual. So most of the people who were in that, most of the interns in that division, they had a lot of like personal projects. They had a lot of initiatives that they took beyond their classes and just like research, and they really looked for that. So they're really looking for the ability to sort of learn on the fly, because for research and development, a lot of the skills that you will need, you will not know before you actually come into the role. So they're sort of looking for that mentality, and that's demonstrated with like the initiatives you take beyond your coursework.
Thank you.
I have something to add on the design side as well. I think that it's really important for R&D positions to know how to make quick mock-ups and prototypes of the designs that you're making, even if it's something just like literally out of cardboard or scraps you find wherever in the lab. So one of the classes that I took at CMU that really helped me with this is literally called Rapid Prototype Design, and it's an ID8 course, and it really helps you think more creatively about your prototypes. You know, it doesn't have to be a perfectly 3D printed CAD model. It can be something that you make out of random things. And so I think that that's like, don't underestimate the value of just making something physical to try and convey your point, because that's always going to be better than some kind of drawing.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. And don't see it in the chat. I did want to go back in case anyone else wanted to answer. For those of you who networked, and it seemed like a lot of you did, whether it was with faculty, you know, a family friend, how did you approach the person? What did you say? I just want to see if anyone else wanted to answer that.
I can talk about my experience with Society of Women Engineers. This has been like the most helpful thing I possibly could have done for my career trajectory. And I think that not only was it amazing to be a part of such a supportive network within CMU and learn about different people's experiences and just even learning about different companies that have internships, but also through our networking at CMU, we bring in so many different people to give who come and give speeches, or that we work with our sponsors. And so that creates a ton of recruiting opportunities. And then we also take people to the national conference every year, which is the largest career fair for women in engineering. And it's so valuable to be able to reach out to companies that don't normally travel to CMU, and you might not be able to get your foot in the door if you're just sending in one of the thousands of applications online. So if you can find any type of group on campus that has a connection to a national organization, that's going to open so many doors for you. And even if you don't get to go to the national conference, even just the SWE Career Center website has so many job listings and ways that you can connect with our professional section in Pittsburgh, and just all kinds of connections throughout the whole country. So I think that any type of national organization is going to open your network so much broader than you could possibly imagine, or that you could reach out to individually, just with your own personal network at CMU.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we have run out of time. So I want to thank the panelists for agreeing to be such a great resource and present their information and their experiences. they did put their email addresses in the chat. So if you have any other questions, you can definitely reach out to them and ask them any types of questions. All right. Have a good.
Thank you all for attending. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a good day.
Nice work, everyone. Very cool. Yes, okay.
Yeah,
Everybody's.
thank you. You guys did
Yeah, you guys did awesome.
great job. Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And you know, I have to say, we did this future of work panel last week talking about, we had campus experts talking about the skills that are going to be needed in the future of work. And I noted you all mentioned them. It was like, you know, adaptability, strong communication skills, whether it's entrepreneurial spirit. And so you're all like already putting into action just the flexibility that you